industry can become more racially inclusive. So each of them will talk individually. Then at the end, I'll come back and open it up for Q&A. But if I share just briefly, when I joined the industry by joining Monsanto in 2009, I never thought I would ever stay that long and be so excited to work in agriculture, in farming. And it began with the purpose that we heard Juan talk about that certainly exists, but it evolved from a lot of learning, and even from many of you, particularly two of our panelists, from Dr. Goldman, the first farmer I ever knew that worked in corporate America, and I learned so much about the value of what it means to create new programs that didn't exist to raise up a next generation in this industry. And from Osa Deba, who I met when he was in college, and I learned from him that when we take young professionals right out of college and, you know, with a pickup truck and put them in rural America, we've got to pivot some of our approaches in corporate America. So very excited to be here with you all. So I'll start with Dr. Mia Farrell and introduce her, and then Dr. Farrell, turn it over to you. She currently serves as the National Manners President and the Assistant Dean and Director for Diversity at the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. Dr. Farrell serves on countless boards and is in cohort 16 of the Food Systems Leadership Institute. Dr. Farrell holds degrees from the University of Kentucky and Murray State University. Thank you, Mia, for being here, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And so it's definitely an honor and privilege to always have the opportunity to share my story, because my goal is to navigate through the agriculture industry through bringing future generations of leaders through the industry and be that mentor for them. And so I am originally from Louisville, Kentucky, from the suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky, and I am a first generation college student who had the privilege to go to a high school where I got a great education. And so as I was growing up, both of my parents were in the medical field, and so that's what I was exposed to. Didn't know much about agriculture other than that's where my food had come from. And so I got a scholarship to go to the University of Kentucky, registered for classes, and started to take those classes to be a physical therapist. And I, one, figured out that those science classes were not for me, but two, I figured out that I really wanted to find a place where I could call home at the University of Kentucky. And so before I started my journey at UK, I was in a freshman summer bridge program where different colleges would come and talk about the organizations that they had, and also talked about the different majors they had in their colleges. And so Quentin Tyler, who is my mentor, he came and he talked about manners. And I was, you know, I had no other awareness of agriculture other, again, than that's where my food came from. And so the first year, I didn't do well in college. And Quentin, he continually followed me through my journey in college. And so it was not until my sophomore year of the second semester that I had changed my major to agricultural economics. And so from that day forward, my life changed forever. It was my first time being on a farm at the age of 19. I was an intern for 4-H Youth Development Cooperative Extension Service, and that opportunity was mind-blowing. Every day I would intern, I would say, I can't believe I'm getting paid to change the lives of youth in the community. And so I had 3 internships during my collegiate career, all centered around the agriculture industry. And through that, when I graduated from UK, I became a 4-H youth development educator. I became an educator in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where my predecessor was there for 30 years. And it was a very traditional program. The youth in the community that looked like me had no idea of what 4-H could offer them. And so when I went to Hopkinsville, and it has a rural and an urban feel to the community. And so when I went to Hopkinsville, I thought about my experience in college. I was in manners as a collegiate student. When Quentin asked me to be the events chair, I didn't know what that role was, but I said yes. And so I was the events chair for a year, and then became the vice president and president for 2 years of my chapter. And from there, I wanted to develop a program for youth grades 7 through 12 in my county. And so I developed in 2011, I started a junior manners program in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And so the impetus behind junior manners for me at that time was to focus on civic engagement because I wanted those youth to have a sense of belonging in their community. I also focused on mentorship because many of these youth did not have positive role models that they could look up to that looked like them. So representation was very, and still is very important. And then I also had them to lead the organization. And so I focused on leadership development. And so I advised the organization, but the youth were there leading the organization. 2011, I started with 11 youth in that program. And when I was promoted within my role, I had 72 youth in the program from the county. And so the way that that program became very strong is that I worked very closely with the FFA advisor in the county. She wanted to increase the diversity within FFA. And so if you look at Hopkinsville, Kentucky today and look at their FFA program, it's very representative of youth from diverse backgrounds. And then also we increased the diversity in our 4-H traditional programs. And so we had youth that participated in your traditional livestock programs and participated in woodworking and in the cooking club and so on and so forth. And so with that, I wanted to make sure that these youth also could understand that they could do anything they put their mind to. And so I had to fundraise many times for our youth to go to our regional and national conference, but it was many of their first time being on a plane. Or even in 2011, we started the Junior Manners Leadership Institute here at the University of Kentucky. It was their first time being on a college campus. And so this Junior Manners program has truly been a pipeline for us at the University of Kentucky, but also at the national level. And so when we look at junior manners here at the University of Kentucky, we have had over the past 8, almost 9 years, 27 students who have gone through junior manners who are now here in our college. And so the diversity here in our college at the University of Kentucky, as far as underrepresented minorities, is 18%. And that's higher than any college here at the University of Kentucky. And so then I had the opportunity to be the human resource specialist for Cooperative Extension Service. And so the internship program that I was in, I was then over the internship program. And so we had many intentional mechanisms in place to make sure that we created a pipeline of diverse talent. And so when I was over that internship program, we had from 5 to 7 slots that we had to recruit and also to have within our internship program. And then even moving in a step forward, we also did a lot of recruitment at North Carolina A&T. And so when you talk about looking at diversity, you have to be intentional in your efforts. And so I work very closely with my counterparts to make sure that, one, we are looking at what we're not doing well, but we're also looking at ways to truly enhance what we are doing within our institution. And then, so in 2015, I became the HR specialist for Extension. And so I was over the affirmative action processes for all 120 counties in Kentucky to make sure that all counties were in compliance with affirmative action. Also, I was over the county program reviews. So every 5 years, each county in Kentucky has to go through a review to make sure that we are in compliance as far as reaching underserved audiences. And then I was also over the onboarding process of our new employees and our mentorship program. And so as I was in my HR role, I was and still am very passionate about making sure that we are intentional in recruiting and retaining students, faculty, and staff. And so I volunteered with the Office of Diversity for about 4 years. And through that, I wanted to make sure that I gained the skills that I needed in order to be who I wanted to be someday. And so Quentin is actually my predecessor. And I said, I want to be like him when I grow up. And so I would go to meetings with him. Believe it or not, I used to be an introvert. I initially was not a people person, but through the network and through the mentors and the development within myself that I wanted, but also with people that wanted to develop me, I had the opportunity to truly be able to level up and get those resources and get that development to be now the Assistant Dean and Director for Diversity. And so when I was in HR, I also held the role of being the Interim Director for Diversity for about 1.5 years. And then August of last year, I became the Assistant Dean and Director for Diversity. And so we are rolling here in the College of Ag at UK and truly making sure that we are meeting the needs of our faculty, students, and staff when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's one thing to talk about recruiting, but we also have many retention mechanisms in place that we utilize here within our college. And so one of the questions that we were also asked is, how do we think the industry could do better to support racial equity? And so first, I would say educate ourselves on the needs for prospective and current employees who come from racially diverse backgrounds. And so when I say that, we have to meet each person where they are, and we can't assume because people come from a particular background or look alike that they all need the same support. And so we definitely have to meet each person where they are from and looking through an equity lens to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our employees. I would also say we have to be intentional. And so I hear many times, well, we don't get many diverse candidates to apply, or we don't know where to go. Well, you have to go where they are. And so that's why I love to talk about Manners and what Manners has done for me and has done for our members, because it's organizations like that where we are developing our students and they're prepared and they're ready. And we talk about these preconceived notions of people from color don't come from a farm. Well, we have many members that were born and raised on a farm. We do have traditional and non-traditional members who have that background, but we have the cream of the crop. And so we have to go where we're trying to target those particular audiences. And then I would say lastly, I am a person that likes to change the box and not check the box. And so when we are looking at engaging our employees or interns from diverse backgrounds, we have to ensure that we mentor our employees or interns, and then also ask them, what do you need? What does support look like for you? What does feeling valued look like and feel like? And so we just have to make sure that we understand that at the end of the day, we are in the people business, and we have to make sure that we are not only taking care of those that are meeting the bottom line, but those that are helping us to meet that bottom line.
Excellent journey. And, you know, I love to hear how you use the power of network for you. And we certainly need to pass that on as we mentor other younger people, Dr. Farrell. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll come back in the Q&A session. I'll now introduce our next speaker presenter, Osa Deba Omakaro. is a pediatric nutrition representative with the Gerber company based in the DC metro area, where he handles formula partnerships for pediatric and hospital accounts. He graduated from Prairie View A&M University with a bachelor's degree in agriculture with a concentration in economics in 2013. After graduating, he has traveled the world working for agriculture and food companies such as Monsanto and Purina. Before Osadeba's current role with Gerber, he was based in New York as a data analyst for all retail sales of Gerber products on the North and East Coast. Welcome, Osadeba, and thanks for sharing your insights and your personal stories from the field.
Thank you so much, and welcome to you all. And it's ironic that you say from the field, because that's where I am. With the business and being one who manages and works with pediatric accounts and hospital accounts, sometimes that takes me out in the field. Even in the pandemic where things might be changing, I'm still trying to address the needs of baby all throughout the DMV area. So just to give a little bit of background of my journey, and amazing presentations from all those that presented thus far. I think me and Dr. Farrell have quite a few similarities within the agriculture economic realm, and then also being able to answer the call when called. When you don't know what the role is, when you don't understand what you're going to be doing, but you know that this is an opportunity for you to represent and for you to represent well, and they called you for a reason. So just to start my story started in Houston, Texas, where I'm from, Missouri City to be specific. When it came to agriculture, the only thing I knew of was Old McDonald and the Chevy truck commercials. So it didn't go further than that. And to understand where your food comes from and to understand how farmers do what they do, you never have a scope or any understanding of what that might be. So up until I went to college at Prairie View was my first dose of agriculture. One, because it's in Prairie View, Texas. If you do not know, that's about 45 minutes outside of Houston, and it's horses, cows, big farmland, and a lot of prairie, as you hear in the name. So starting out my journey in college, I started off as a political science major, and I didn't have any interest in farming. I didn't have any interest in agriculture. My focus was to be an attorney one day. And as I progressed through or matriculated through Prairie View, I noticed that I wasn't necessarily driven in my classes. I was excelling in those classes, but I wasn't driven. One, I had to pay for school out of pocket. And my parents, although they are fortunate and I have both of them, I leaned a lot on my financial aid. After my first semester, I made great grades and I saw no return. And I got a lot of support from my agricultural counterparts that I didn't even know were in agriculture. They just tend to always lend a hand whenever I was in my dorm. They were always ready and willing and up in the mornings with me early in the cafeteria area. And I had no clue why I was seeing these people. They invited me to an event called the Ag Day on the Hill, where I actually ventured out into the farm. Never seen a farm in America. My grandfather owned a cassava farm in Nigeria, so I ended up there from the time and time again when I would go as a youth. But later on in life, I was able to experience it in my university. I was blown away seeing full ranch, full crop production, full agricultural production happening right next to me, literally right next to my dorm. I loved the experience. I felt like it was something where I can actually see the results of my work if I was to contribute my work there. So I decided the next semester within my freshman year to actually transition into becoming an agriculture major. And I was thinking, okay, how can I make this something that I can sell to my parents? Okay, I'm gonna join in the economics realm. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be an ag economist. And from there, I was able to then transition into agriculture. And after my very first semester, I was blessed with the privilege of receiving an internship. Now, to a lot of people, that doesn't necessarily happen. And to understand how big of an impact that was for me was pretty much I didn't have a concept of internships going into college. I didn't have a concept of the benefits I can receive going into college. And once I joined the agriculture department, I not only received scholarships for my great grades, I also received an internship that was paid. Every single internship as a political science major is usually pro bono. So that was a difference in my life. I was going off to make money during the summer and also do something that I enjoy, which a lot of my colleagues didn't get to experience it with, whether they were engineering majors, whether they were education majors, whether they were any gambit of majors within the university. And I thought that was a privilege and I was really appreciative. But even to get there, my first encounter with the company that gave me my internship was through one of their recruitment employees, Clarissa Opaleke. She had a tough time on my campus carrying a box of pizzas. And I happened to be an agriculture major. And I saw her walking through the campus, so I decided to help her. While helping her, she then roped me in to the recruitment presentation that she was given at the time. And through sitting through that presentation, I was the only agriculture major along many other business majors that was in the presentation. I answered a couple of questions. I got a couple of free slices of pizza. And by the end of that, I had an interview date for my internship. That was an experience where it was once again answering the call when you don't know what you're going to necessarily receive out of this. I had no intention of going to the internship presentation, although I was an agriculture major. But once that was highlighted that I was one, once I participated in the event, I was then given that opportunity. And that triggered what next led to some more calls, answering more calls. On my first internship, I was given the site of Brookings, South Dakota. And there I would go from Houston, Texas to Brookings, South Dakota to work on corn and soybean farms with some of the best farmers I've probably met in my life, and to an experience that I never expected. Thank you. I see the comments coming in from the panelists as well. I do think that experience, one, completely shattered my understanding of reality, because I was no longer just seeing the ranching that was going on in Texas. I was also seeing the full crop production that was happening in South Dakota, and how viable that business, how fertile the soil was, and how intricate the business was. I then got an opportunity to also see what understand the cooperative extension as it played out in South Dakota in comparison to how it worked in Texas. I also was able to stay, my first place I lived was in AGR House, which is agricultural fraternity. Because I didn't necessarily have a place that I knew exactly where I would be, my manager at the time, who I would be interning under, was a part of the fraternity and said, hey, you can stay here. So I stayed in the ag frat house my first internship coming out of college. And that led on to more experiences. That led on to more opportunities. Once I finished that experience, the next following summer, I was given another opportunity where I would then go to Lubbock, Texas to work with cotton farmers. And that was, for too many people telling my friends and my family, I'm going to go work on a cotton farm during the summer, that was a shock to the system. But one, they did see the benefit of my previous experience in South Dakota, where I was able to come home and I didn't have to ask for any grocery money. I didn't have to ask for any gas money. I was doing well there. But they also saw the pictures that I was sent home. Everywhere I've been, I've sent pictures to try to increase that access, increase that exposure to people who might not understand what an agriculturalist does. In Lubbock, Texas, working on the cotton farm and working with the cotton farmers, I got the experience to also lead that internship experience for the other 49 interns within the nation. Wherever they would talk to me about their experience. I would work as what you might see as the HR liaison to help them break in the experience, because I was a returning intern. After finishing that program, I was given one more internship where I went to Omaha, Nebraska. And that was by far my best internship. One, I had a lot of experience it was a little bit more city than Lubbock, Texas. It was a little bit more city than Brookings, but I also had the experience and a support system at that time. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, before I even got into the internship, the event was to help me get into the 1890s leadership program that Monsanto held at the time. Monsanto, that is now Bayer, held at the time, where students of 1890s universities had the opportunity to meet at Monsanto, go through a leadership conference, and then mingle amongst other HBCU students with top executives, as well as break in different leadership forums and events that helped us train and understand what agriculture and what Monsanto had to offer us. I went through all of these places to then get my experience within West Lafayette, Indiana, where I had my first territory. I was given an opportunity with Channel Seed, where I was a seed salesman who managed other salesmen who handled corn and soybeans in the West Lafayette, Rensselaer area of Indiana, alongside Purdue. So I would go to corn days, I would go to field days, I did stand counts. I went out, I helped manage SWOT analysis for different growers within the Indiana area, and alongside I would sit on different panels with manners participants at Purdue University. And if you haven't noticed, just to make sure folks know, this is a Manners shirt from Prairie View A&M. I got this my junior year. I won impromptu speaker that year with Manners. I should be a Manners professional, and I will be. I'll hold that as a testament to you, Dr. Farrell. But with that experience in Indiana, I was with other Manners students that were learning and people that were learning in the agricultural field, where I might be the only one. Now, to give you the breakdown, I was less than 1% of the sales force when you talk about African Americans within Monsanto, but I was still known for being someone who can achieve, someone who can do work, and someone who is willing to go anywhere. So I think that's some of the things that we have to hold on our shoulders when we're people of color within agriculture. We take risks every time we say yes, but we take those risks knowing that we will be able to rise to the occasion. We take those risks knowing that we will be able to benefit, if not only for us, but for someone else who might not have known what we are doing. Once I left Indiana, I went on to Mount Carmel, where I was promoted to a new territory, Mount Carmel, Illinois, which is Southern Illinois. And I had 3 counties in which I was given a task to triple the business. That is not easy. That does not come to everyone. But luckily, I also was able to accomplish that task. But I didn't do it alone. I did it leaning on my skills of networking. I did it leaning on the skills of understanding that I'm from somewhere else, so the people who I work with can produce things and contribute things that others might not expect of them. And that helped in my territory, that helped in my work. Upon leaving Illinois, I then went to St. Louis. I worked with people there. Then I left from there, went to work with Purina within St. Louis. And from there, I went to New York. There, I handled an opportunity where I was covering the entire New York metro area from East Hampton all the way down to Harlem, and then all the way down to Tribeca, which will be the financial district, handling all their pet specialty goods stores. That's PetSmart, Petco, and Pet Supplies Plus, and then any mom and pop in between. These are different experiences. These are things that were new to me, but I was able to do well enough there where I became a data analyst. Another opportunity to transition and challenge myself to see what does the data look like when we're looking at food in the food industry, the consumer packaged goods industry. And then currently, I'm now working as a pediatric nutrition representative within the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And that also gives me an opportunity to work with Gerber and understand, okay, now how do we feed our babies? If you can't see the trend, I love agriculture, I love food, and I love making sure that someone's eating after my job is done. This brings us to where we are now, and to think about exactly how do we increase that access to diverse candidates? How do we help others be able to do the things that not only I'm doing, not only Mr. Goldman's doing and Dr. Farrell's doing, but so many more that are out there that would have wished that they had met themselves earlier in the journey. I think one for me is understanding that when you are doing something and when you're presenting something, the person who will do it next might do it differently. And if they are doing it differently and have a different approach, we need to accept it if it is providing those results. I think one of my hurdles while going or working through agriculture is because I was so different, because I did things so different. Sometimes it was a shock. People didn't understand how he's doing it this way, how he's talking to this person, how he's getting this person to come here and getting things done. I think that's something that we should admire and we should coin and we should promote. Once we do have those people who are doing things well and we're doing things well, like Dr. Farrell said, and make sure I'm saying that right, we should promote them. We should give them the opportunity to continue to raise the bar because they're doing it. They might not be doing it the way somebody in the room before their predecessor has done, but they're doing it and they're doing it different. And we should encourage and embrace that diversity of thought. I think also the accessibility. I think one thing that's pretty common and current now that is a lot of people are looking to it is when we have this need to feed so many people, millions and millions of people by 2050, we look at the loss of the land that we have within the agricultural realm. We look at people moving to urban farming. We can meet them there. We can, I think it was Grow America, which was a Monsanto campaign that had a semi truck that would drive around to different state fairs. We can do this. We can utilize similar approaches to access urban areas and help them where they have those community farms and teach some of those classes. I currently am looking to work with Catholic charities in the DMV area. They have volunteer farming practices where you get to work with urban farmers within the DMV area. I applaud and encourage more people to take that as an opportunity. Whether you're in rural America or whether you're in the urban city, take the opportunity. If you are an agriculturalist, meet someone else that might not be and give them a view of what you're doing. All in all, I think the access and then also the encouraging and acceptance of those new ideas would then bridge that gap and you yourself can become that bridge and take it as yourself. I believe that my role is to encourage someone else by not just what I say, but what I do, most importantly. And that overall is my journey, and that is me.
Great. Thank you, Osa Deba, for sharing your journey. Answer the call when called. I think we can all learn for that. And I love that you're coming for our jobs. We need to grow more of you that's doing that. All right, so I have the pleasure, we've got two more great stories and then we are gonna get to some Q&A so you can start teeing up your questions there. So I'm gonna introduce Dr. Dwayne Goldman. He is the Executive Director of the National Black Growers Council. Dr. Goldman has over 30 years of experience in the agriculture, chemical, and seed industry, and is also a farmer in Southeast Arkansas. Dr. Goldman received his BS and MS degrees from the University of Arkansas and a PhD from Iowa State University, all in agronomy. We've got a lot to learn from you and your experiences from the field, Dr. Goldman. Take it away.
Oh, I could teach you all a lot though in just a couple of seconds. It's not that much. Let me, so I don't come across as cheesy, let me say how much of a pleasure it is to be on this panel and certainly to be with my former boss, Miss Melissa Harper. Good to see you again. Thanks for all the work you've done and continue to do, and it's certainly invaluable to agriculture. As I listen to Mia and Osa Deba, good to see you again, man. As I listen to you, my story is totally different, and I just need to tell you that. I'm 10 of 11 kids down here in Southeast Arkansas. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents were farmers. And this is right after the Civil War. They managed to get a hold of a little piece of land, and both my mother and my father's side of the family grew up on the farm. In fact, my parents met while they were chopping cotton on adjacent farms, and that's the truth. And so, being 10 of 11, you know, we worked. My summers as a little kid would be spent chopping. We grew cotton and soybeans, and we had what we called a truck patch. It's about a 10-acre field of fresh market vegetables that we would sell on the open market, and which generated a lot of income. And by any number of standards, we were poor, but I didn't know it until I was probably a teenager, because I never went to school hungry and never went to bed hungry. We raised most of the stuff we ate. My father and the other Black farmers in that community were pillars of the community. So we had a rich social life, and we had what I thought everything we needed. So, and then I started school. This was right after really modern integration, and I started school. And but before then, right before I started school, I made a fatal mistake. I had a nice position in the family pecking order. That there's girl, boy in that order, and then there's a whole bunch of boys, and then I got a little sister. And so I'm about 5 years old. Yeah, you see you shaking your head. I'm about 5 years old, and the boys all go to the field and chop cotton. And so I had the chance to stay home and play with Mama and my little sister. She prepared lunch for the big kids coming in, and it messed with me. So I started acting a fool, really, and telling Dad that I can go to the field. I can do this. I'm big enough. He said, "No, Dwayne, you're too small." I was like, "No, I can do this." So after a couple of days of that, he put me in the pecking order. So he took a hole, chopped the handle off in half so it fit me. And I went to the field with the big boys and had a hot breakfast. And you're thinking, man, this is pretty cool. And then about 10 o'clock in Southeast Arkansas, it starts to get hot in the summer. And that sun starts coming up and your breakfast starts wearing off. And you're like, I don't know about this. And so you figure out that, you know, I'd be better off at home. So I go home at lunch, and then I'm acting the fool on the other side saying, you know what, I can take a little teasing, but I don't think I'm going back this afternoon. But I was 4 hours late because my pecking order had already been established. And so that's what started my career in agriculture. And so from that, though, in all seriousness, when I was in junior high school, you start hearing more and more questions about what you want to be when you grow up, what you want to do when you grow up. And it was at that time that I had started to spend time with Dad. I had started driving a tractor by then, so I had elevated a little bit. But I would ask Dad questions about why you do this and what are you doing that for, and why do you plant cotton before you plant soybeans? I mean, all these kinds of questions. And sometimes he would answer me, and sometimes he would tell me to go places to find an answer. I think he was trying to pique my curiosity, maybe. But it was through those conversations and as I got certainly into high school and was pretty adept at math and sciences, I think my scientific curiosity really peaked. And my love of being out in the field, and it's really a pretty neat feeling to plant a seed in the spring and to go back and take care of that, and to go back, in the case of fresh vegetables, in 4 or 5 weeks. In the case of a cotton crop, you know, you're talking 3.5 months. But to go back and take that from seed to something that's valuable and life-sustaining, I mean, that's farming, and that's what attracts, I think, a lot of people to it. And so by the time I was 17, 18, I had decided that I wanted to farm. And so when I graduated high school, at the age of 17, I trekked to the University of Arkansas with the sole intention of getting a degree in a technical field, and I minored in agricultural business, Osadeba, to make sure I can handle that part of it. And I started out in ag engineering because I had a scholarship from the College of Engineering. And I thought that, okay, this is cool. But I can remember almost to the day in ag engineering, the dean from the College of Ag came over and talked about all the different disciplines. And what's amazing is that as a kid, I knew I wanted to farm, but the word agronomy wasn't in my vocabulary. And so when I heard about the agronomy department, literally the next day I go over, excuse me, I go over and I switch majors. And I've been an agronomist since then. But the story doesn't stop right there, because remember, my plan was to go to school for 4 years, get a degree in farm. And when I graduated when I graduated college, I graduated in May of '85, and I planned on farming in Southeast Arkansas. Well, you can't start farming in May because certain things have to be in place. You can't put a business plan together and implement it starting that late. So I leaned on my mentor. I really had two mentors. My dad was probably my first mentor, and you heard me talking about him. And we're talking about diversity and together we grow. Dad was a tough guy. He was fair. He had an 8th grade education, but one of the smartest guys I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and really spending time with. But I had another mentor who was, as I understand it, at one time a devout segregationist. He was a very accomplished soybean breeder at the University of Arkansas by the name of Charles Cavaness. He became my undergrad advisor. And regardless of what feelings that he might have had prior to, 1983, 4, he was really a mentor to me, because he saw something in me that I didn't even know at the time existed. And so when I graduated, he asked me what I was going to do right before I graduated. And I said, well, I think I'll just go work on the farm this summer, and then I'm going to start farming next year. He said, well, if you're going to do that, have you thought about working in county extension service? And I said, well, I know about that, but not really. So he hooked me up with a county extension agent intern job. And there I spent time, I'd been in 4-H mill. I knew about the programs, but I spent time doing a little bit of everything. But I really liked when I would be riding with the entomologists or the agronomists or those people that would really be going out on farms, doing demonstrations and solving real world problems for farmers. And I really enjoyed that. And so the other thing I learned, though, was that if I was going to be in a position to make decisions and impact agriculture on a larger scale, as an agronomist, I was at least going to have a master's degree. And so I thought that I had outsmarted Dr. Cavaness and outsmarted the system, because I still wanted to farm. So I go back to grad school. I didn't graduate with a 3.0, full disclosure. So back then, maybe today, if you don't have a 3.0 when you graduate, you can't be a full admit in grad school. So I had to go in as a conditional admit. So I'm like, I got this. I really want to farm, so I'm just going to go back to grad school for 1 semester. I'm going to bust my butt, and I'm going to get qualified to be fully admitted so that I'll have a fallback position. And that was my intent. So I did. I went to school. I made above a 3-point. I got full admit. And then I go in and talk to Dr. Cavaness. I pack all my belongings in my little raggedy car, and I head home to farm. And Dr. Cavaness called me while I was home, and I go back to the university and started on my master's degree, really started on my master's degree. And that semester, I started doing my research. And once again, just like I talked about farming, planting a seed, cultivating it, tending it, and harvesting it, I started to do research. And during the literature search, you start to see how all this is connected and how the little bit of research that I'm doing can have a positive impact. And I really got turned on by research, and I really immersed myself in it. So much so that and a master's degree was nowhere in my plans. So when I started grad school, I had to sit with my committee, and they said, Dwayne, is there any chance that you will go on after your master's degree? I said, no, not a chance. And I was telling the truth. At the time, I was telling the truth. But on that track, when I started doing the research, and then I'm going back to this statement where I said, the more you invest in yourself, the more you can realize the opportunities in front of you. During the work on my master's, I really started to see value in a PhD degree. And my intention then, it shifted from wanting to farm. I wanted to be a university professor. And so I go from University of Arkansas to Iowa State, but my crop was soybeans. And I had some good advice to get out of Arkansas. You say you could be comfortable here, but you don't want 3 degrees from the same institution. Iowa State was a premier, still is a premier institution. So I went to Iowa State. And then on top of that, Mia, they wanted a graduate student to serve in the position that Dr. Cooper now serves in. Because back then it wasn't an assistant dean position. It was a grad student, and I spent a quarter of my time over in ag administration recruiting and trying to retain minority students in the College of Ag at Iowa State. That plus working in my academic department. And while there, starting a managed chapter at Iowa State. I started as a grad student in 1989. So it's been a heck of an experience. But at any rate, in that program, I started to interact with a lot of universities and a lot of people from industry, and I started to look at industry as a possibility. Long story short, when I graduated, I spent 4 years with American Cyanamid. And then after 4 years, I entertained a second offer, Melissa, from Monsanto Company. And I joined Monsanto in 1995. And I started doing research and development work. I spent 25 years with the company. 15 of those was in technology development. That's the group, Osa, you may remember this, but that's the guys that when stuff is coming out of our research pipeline and we kind of know how it's going to work in the field, but you need to fine tune it, technology development is the group. And I still say in all these companies, that's the sweet spot for me, because you got to know a lot about the science and how it works, but you've also got to be more practical in translating that to how it can benefit your farmer customers. And I really relish that spot. So I spent 15 years doing different things in that. I managed soybeans, I managed cotton. I did a lot of the research myself. Had the opportunity to work with a lot of interns and really got close to the 1890 land grant community through some of the outreach that we were doing. And in the last 10 years, I spent doing, I spent about 5 years in government affairs, working on a lot of issues that were near and dear to me and trying to stay in the sweet spot where I could use my technical knowledge to solve larger problems. And then had the pleasure of continuing that kind of work under Melissa's leadership in HR, working on diversity and inclusion initiatives and reaching out to a lot of folks. When in that, and I'm summing up, Melissa, in that, one group I met in the late 2000s when I was a product development and marketing manager in cottonseed. So we were developing varieties of cottonseed that we would license to companies that would sell to farmers, and they would have Monsanto's trait center. But in that process, we were thrown, as a company, we were thrown an accusation that our intended purchase of Delta Pine, a cottonseed company, would be detrimental. Catastrophic was the word for Black farmers. And so, long story short, I asked some Black cotton farmers who I knew what their thoughts were, and we found out pretty quickly that their thoughts, their opinions were no different than our white farmer customers. But now what do we do with the information? So we decided to create this advisory group of Black farmers that could advise Monsanto on this issue. And fortunately, enough of us had enough foresight to where we said there's bound to be some other issues that's going to come where this group could benefit us. And so we started out to create this advisory group that became the National Black Growers Council. And so for 10 years, I served as an advisor for Monsanto Bayer to that group. And since February, I've been executive director of that group, and they are a wonderful group to work with. I know several of you have probably had the opportunity to interact with them, but they're a wonderful group. Third, fourth, fifth generation farmers, most of them full-time. They farm from Virginia over to Texas in the Old South. We have a board member in Kentucky. So they range from 40, 50 acres up to over 15,000 acres per farm. The average is probably about 2,500 to 3,000 acres. But when you're a Black farmer in the US, it's ironic how we were reminded of how far we have to go in race relations by a truly tragic set of events. And so as executive director of council now, I've gotten a lot of calls about what does racism look like in agriculture? And you just have to say, oh boy, how much of this you want, you know, because I could go on and on. But here's where we land. And I've talked to our board. We put a statement out on our website. I'd encourage you to go look at it on what racism looks like. And how do we actually have an honest conversation about improving diversity? Because together, Kristen, I think we do grow. I got 3 points, and then I'll yield. One, if we're going to get serious about this, we have to ask the tough questions, because when you look at race relations in the U.S., and particularly in agriculture, when we were slaves, subject to the whims of whatever somebody told us to do with no recourse, that's a hell of a position to dig out from. And so if you are not ready to listen to that story and see how it plays out 4, 5, 6 generations later, don't bother us, don't ask. So we need to ask the tough questions and then listen to the answers. And then the other thing, I think the second thing we need to do, we really need to think outside the box, because in agriculture, I mentioned our growers being 3rd, 4th, 5th generation farmers, but we have, you know, white growers right next to us that are 6th, 7th, 8th, because they weren't slaves prior to the Civil War. They were slave owners, and they owned the plantations, and they managed to hang on to those. And so when you come from a situation where you had nothing and you had to build and work through Jim Crow to try and hang on to a little piece of the corner, there are cumulative effects of being historically denied that tend to show up. They show up in your capital, they show up in your attitude, they show up in your expectations. We really need to think outside the box if we're going to have a serious discussion about how we overcome this racism. And then the third point would be what I tell my own kids is, and I tell students that I've had the pleasure of mentoring or working with. Everything that sounds a little strange, everything that sounds a little harsh, don't automatically think that that's a criticism or that that's bad. There's tough love out there that needs to happen. So when you show up late or not on top of your game and somebody jumps in your collar about it, that could be helpful. That could be helpful. And so look at that and think through and ask yourself, I mean, what you owe to yourself is to show up and deliver. And when you come up with less than that and somebody checks you, that may not necessarily be bad. It may be that they are trying to sharpen you for a better day. And so those are the 3 things. I'll stop right there. I'm interested in questions and answers myself. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. Those are great points. And, you know, there's a lot to be learned from a story of someone that is Black, farming in America, from a farming family, and you have the blend of corporate experience. So I'm excited to keep this going, because we need more of all of you on this panel in all of our organizations. Our final panelists, and then we'll shift to Q&A. So don't forget to go into the Q&A button and put any questions there. Is Dr. Kemba Marshall. Thanks for being with us. Dr. Marshall is the Director of Veterinary Services for Purina. Dr. Marshall has worked in private veterinary practice, university laboratory animal practice, and corporate retail veterinary practice. Dr. Marshall attended Howard University, received her DVM from the University of Florida, College of Veterinary Medicine, and completed an avian exotic animal residency at the University of Tennessee College of Veterinary Medicine. Wow, thank you for being with us. And thank you for starting out by sharing your personal stories from the field, Dr. Marshall.
Yeah, absolutely. It is my honor to be here. I don't know about the rest of you, but one thing that I am learning in COVID is how to quickly run from Zoom to Zoom meeting. I was waving goodbye to my other folks. They're like, hey, I have a question. I'm like, no, you don't, because I got to go. So I am sorry to be delayed, but I am so delighted to be with you all together now. You know, I think that I am learning my story for me makes perfect sense and is average and normal. But when I was talking to Kristen about this, she about fell on the floor because she was like, your parents really love you. I told my parents when I was 8 that I was going to veterinary school. I read a book. My mom, when she started, was an English teacher. And so every summer we had book reports every month because my mom was taking us to the library and forcing us to read these books. So C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the book. I was a kid. I full on believed it was happening. That's the one where there's Aslan the lion and there's the wicked ice queen and Aslan gets killed and comes back to life and I'm outside with my German shepherds. Like, listen, I know you guys can talk. I know that you have meetings. If you need anything, let me help you. Of course, my German shepherds are like, do you have food, water, or toys? Because if not, why are you standing out here? Like, we don't need you right now. But that was it. I was hooked. And so I've never wanted to do anything else. The other thing that I think that I underappreciated now, but really appreciate it now, is the first veterinarian I ever saw in my life was Dr. Larry Wallace, who cared for our German shepherds and was our family veterinarian. So seeing a veterinarian who looked like me was a powerful, powerful confirmation that what I wanted was an attainable goal. And so for those of you who are not as aware, when you look at the entire veterinary profession, even today, 96% of veterinarians are Caucasian American, 2 to 2.5% are African American. So when you talk about statistics and probability and likelihood, the likelihood that I would have my first ever veterinarian be an African American male, for me, really affirms that I am where I was meant to be. So, you know, I think that, you know, I'm originally from Jacksonville, Florida. And so growing up in the South, you know, I had those experiences that we all have. You know, my parents, I vividly remember them, you know, driving us by the establishments that you couldn't go in because African Americans weren't allowed inside, but you could go through the drive-through. You know, we had the talks about how to hold your body and how to move and how to walk around, especially persons of authority. One other thing that I think is just a superpower that I was granted is that my dad's a practicing attorney. And I said that my mom started as an English teacher and retired as a high school principal. And they're insanely dedicated and loving. So when I said I was going to vet school, they had no idea what I was talking about, but they were like, game on, let's do this. And they were like, work hard, you know, and things will happen. And so for me, I think that's one of the things that was really important for my journey. Also, what was really important for my journey is I'm a daddy's girl. So I'm the youngest daughter and the middle child. And way before the days of gender reveal, my parents were told up until the moment I was headed down the chute that I was a boy. And so I have an older sister. And my dad was like, you know what? I got plans. I can't wait. And I come out, I'm a girl. And my dad is like, well, we're doing all the things that I was going to do had you been a boy. So I was always with my dad. My dad has polio, had polio as a child and recovered with a pretty severe limp. And so when I was learning to walk, one of the things that I really understood was exclusion and the pain of that, because my father had to say, you can't hold my hand, because you learning to walk, holding my hand means that you're going to walk with a limp. So your mom has to teach you how to walk, because if I teach you how to walk, you're not going to walk normally, because the way that I walk is not how most people walk. And so you can imagine as a little kid, that's a lot to take in. But I also was very keenly aware as a young child of where are handicap spaces and, you know, parking spaces, and can my dad make it up these stairs, and how far is the walk? So I was also really early interested in accessibility for all. And I think it's also, you know, one of those things that, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this, you know, the first time that I heard that first racial slur, right? And I was on the school playground, and it was one of my schoolmates, and I didn't know what the word meant, but I knew it was sent in anger. And I think my response was something like, "No, I'm not, but you are." And I went home that day and told my mom what happened. And then, you know, like so many parents do, my mom explained what that word meant and then said, "Listen, that's not the person that you should play with during recess. That person said this about you. It has nothing to do with you, and you do not have to put yourself in that space." And so, you know, I think that also helped and gave me definitely a lot of confidence growing up in being okay speaking for myself. And I think it's also interesting that the first person who really ever questioned if I was going to be able to get through vet school was a veterinary professor. And at that time, I was at Purdue University. Purdue University had then, and still has now, an HBCU, so historically Black college and university visitation program for HBCU scholars. And so I was attending Howard University. And so I was a student talking to a veterinary professor, and he said, "You know, vet school is really tough. I don't know if you want to do this." And at that time, I was good at speaking for myself. So I said to the program administrator, "This, I don't think it's supposed to happen. I'm here because of my grades. I know I'm going to be fine." And so the program administrator said, "I apologize. What we're going to do is we're going to have you go to lunch with one of our vet school administrators as a peace offering." Fine. And so we're driving to lunch, and the administrator asked me where did I want to go for lunch, and he was driving. And I asked him if there were any good sushi restaurants. And he whipped his head around and said, "You eat sushi?" I did not need to talk to my parents about that, because I did know that Purdue University was not for me. It was not going to happen. And I share those things just to say to you all that in or out of veterinary medicine or agriculture, the lived experience of African-American individuals, other ethnic minorities, is something that you, in order to do that successfully and be here now and able to see the humor in that, I really credit my parents for that resiliency, that grit, and that ability to speak for myself. And one of the things that now, this is my second corporation. My first was PetSmart, and now I've been with Land O'Lakes Purina. So I want to be sure that everyone knows that Land O'Lakes Purina does all the Old MacDonald Had a Farm stuff. So beef cows and dairy cows and sheep and goats and pigs and stuff that you will find in Tractor Supply and other farm and feed type stores. You know, I think it's also very important to emphasize not only the fact that for a lot of African American and other underrepresented minorities, you can be the first in your family to not only go to college, but also the first in your family to work in a corporate environment. And attending a university for undergrad or graduate degree and navigating a corporate environment is not for the faint of heart. And so I think that when we think about what can we do here together, we're in this space, we're all here because what can we do, right? We've been watching the news, we know where we are. I think it's helpful to think that for underrepresented minorities, what happens after work, 5:01 p.m., is as important as what is happening during the day. And what do I mean by that? Where are you going to get your hair done? Is there a salon? Is there a barber shop? Is there a grocery store? Is there a house of worship? These social things that we all need can be so challenging, especially for people like me. I am literally sitting at a research farm in Gray Summit, Missouri. Gray Summit, Missouri is 45 minutes outside of St. Louis. And I promise you, there is not one person in Gray Summit, Missouri who has hair the color of mine and the texture of mine who would know anything to do. Even if well-intentioned, they said, "I will try and help you." right? And so what I am hoping that we can do, and what I personally am doing, because, you know, I mean, you've got a lot of time on your hands in this COVID environment trying to think, what can your specific impact be? I am very interested in reimagining the way that we do recruitment. Yes, we need a better pipeline. Yes, we need to talk to elementary and high school kids. And so kids will know when they think about top careers, like, I want to be an attorney, I want to be a physician, I want to be a dentist. We're also saying, I want to be an agronomist, I want to be an ag engineer, you know? But we also have to think about where are people going to live, right? I will tell you that sometimes the term agricultural and rural are synonymous. And there are some mindsets and some historical things that happen in rural communities where you may not be personally safe after hours. You may not be personally safe to live in these places. So what I'm hoping we can really do together is think about the entire holistic experience. When we're bringing folks into colleges, into universities, into work settings, what do we do, especially those that are in remote facilities? Because so many times our corporate headquarters are in larger cities, right? We have more kind of like liberal thought, and people have seen people from a wider background more often than that. So while I am here today, my full-time job is working, of course, with Land O'Lakes Purina. But my part-time job, and the thing for me that I think is my give back in this COVID environment, is really, really sticking with that recruitment and that retention piece, and what can we do to further that. So again, thank you all for being here, and I am also anxiously anticipating our question and answer time.
Great, thank you for that powerful story, Dr. Marshall. Seeing someone that looks like you is affirmation, and that is so true. So thanks for sharing that. We are now shifting into our latter 20 minutes of Q&A. I did see one question so far, and I also want to get to and have you all, from your personal experiences, as you shared, Dr. Marshall, answer for us, what is it we can do if we think about the organizations we represent, whether it's the NGOs, academia, corporations, but from each of you as panelists as well, like Dr. Marshall shared, tell us what we can do, because this should be action oriented. But one question first before we get to that is, what is the best diversity and inclusion program you've seen in terms of ideology and actual success? What have you seen that has worked from any of your experiences? I think Osadeba, you started to answer about the 1890s experience.
I made it really specific to the agricultural realm, because that's actually one of the few programs that I've seen. I believe that the 1890s leadership program that I was in Montana was the best that I've seen within the scope of agriculture, because I've seen so many people of color or students of color while I was in college still flourish in their ag careers currently from that program, with some of the same mentors that they made within the program. But I do believe that there's still opportunities. I do believe that what Dr. Kemba said, we still have to challenge our thoughts as far as how we make those programs a little bit more robust, as far to connect these students with people and places that can give them even more experience and also protect them. She touched on a point that hit me so close to home. Being in all those different places, I've been on farms where I've been met with shotguns. I've been to places where they say they strictly, seriously don't want me to manage their business. But in those situations, thinking with agility, I would utilize one of the seedmen who I was their manager to step in my place and just give them a script to handle the business. Where we have those people who find themselves where they might not necessarily be safe or secure, we need to empower them and listen and take them seriously. But I would say the 1890s program would be the program I would they did the best. It gave me mentors, and I still see people flourish into the field.
Great. Anyone else before we move on to another question? A great program or practice that you've seen actually get success? Dr. Goldman.
Yeah, well, I have a question for you, Ms. Harper, first. When you said, what can we do? Was that we together we grow as a group? Is that what you challenged us to think about?
Yeah, I would like us to think about, or you all to think about, what can we as a collaborative organization, together we grow, with the makeup of so many across our industry, NGOs, academia. That's what we exist to do. So what can we do? And or certainly if you have anything specific to a corporate view or academic view for universities or NGOs, et cetera. So let's think through that.
Okay.
I didn't know if anyone else has a program you've seen successful, or
but I would like to address that one, Melissa. And what comes to mind is early in my career, I was a soybean technical manager for Monsanto, and I had responsibility for all technical recommendations around Roundup-Ready soybeans across the South. And we were proud of the fact that for 3 years running, and this is a farmer deal, but for 3 years running, we had conducted the research, written the protocols, summarized them, and had a pretty compelling story. We sold out of seed, period, for 3 years running. Year 2, I'm at a small farmer conference at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And I told you I'm from Pine Bluff, so I'm speaking to a friendly crowd. I know these people. A lot of them intimate. I play with their kids, all of this. And I'm giving them the same presentation that I had given at that point, probably literally 100 times, to different grower groups and seed companies and all this kind of stuff. And the receptivity that I had gotten from the seed companies was a lot different and a lot warmer than the receptivity that I got from a home audience. And about midway through the presentation, I just stopped because you can feel it. And I asked what the concerns were. And the elephant in the room was the fact that those soybean seeds were 2.5, 3 times as high as non-Roundup-Ready soybean. And the information that I was sharing with them went through a full season and told them how those benefits could translate into actual savings. And that's why we had sold out of seed. But the underlying assumption in that room was that you had to be a certain size to capture those benefits. And so early in my career, I took a blind leap of faith and said, Dr. English, who was over the small farm program at UPB, still is, I said, you got to help me with this, man. I said, these benefits that I'm talking about are per acre, but I can tell from the people in this room, these farmers don't know that. So we've been doing all these demonstrations across the South, hundreds and hundreds of demonstrations. Very few of them have been on Black farmers. So I said, I'm going to come up with a way to do 10 locations in Arkansas. And I want you to help me. And I am sweating because I got a little flexibility in my budget, not enough to cover 10. So I got to go back to my colleagues and pitch this idea. But when I went back to them and thought it out and pitched it, it was accepted overwhelmingly. It was funded. We did the work. We did it on these Black farms that were a lot smaller. And the perception that they had that the benefits were not as great, you know what? They were right. The benefits weren't as great as what we've seen on the larger farms. They were even greater. And they were greater because weed control was a more limiting factor in them achieving their potential. But it wasn't just the fact that the results came out. What was more, what really struck me and what stuck with me throughout my career was the fact that we've got to figure out a way to reach people where they are in meaningful ways of people that they can trust. Because I can almost guarantee you in 1998, they weren't going to go to the large white farmer that was probably trying to take over the operation and ask them for information on a seed variety or the best program. They needed to go to a farmer that they trusted, one that maybe looked like them, so that they could have that kind of camaraderie. And that part of it is kind of human nature. So we have to allow diverse people to play to their human nature and once again, figure out ways to reach them. So you asked about programs. We ended up duplicating that program across about 10 or 11 states. And each time we did it, the results were essentially the same. And where these small farmers realized benefits that they didn't know were within their reach until we ran that program. So it's just the importance of reaching people where they are.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Goldman. I'm going to ask maybe one voice from each of these next two questions, and then we'll close out with hearing from each of you on what can Together We Grow do. Question, and either anyone, how do we move beyond the focus of diverse candidates at the entry level of our positions and focus better on senior leadership levels too? There seems to be an over-index of a focus at the entry level.
I have a couple of thoughts to share on that one. I think, one of the things that we have to challenge ourselves on is for any type of program that's for high potential employees or anything that's based on performance reviews, we have got to push and understand how those performance reviews are really being managed at the individual level, because everything is tied to a performance review. So if my manager says I'm a 5 and I'm a rock star, I get every opportunity. If my manager says I'm a 1 and I'm a poor performer, I'm stuck. I'm on this island and no one knows. And yes, I report to my manager, but I think that so many times corporations, companies do so well at asking the manager, what is the associate doing performance-wise? We don't do as good a job as asking employees in a safe, anonymous manner, how is your manager performing, right? So take a 360. A 360, if there are 5 direct reports and 1 manager, and we're asked to enter comments, I'm not entering a comment, or if I do, it's going to be so bland and so vanilla that you'll never know it was me. Because what I'm not going to do is call my parents and say, I got fired for giving my opinion. I will figure it out like we all do, right? So we have to really think critically about these systems that we've put in place and understand what the impact is of those systems. The second thing that I think that we should do is when we talk about mentors and mentees, we have to get out of this thing about, if I'm an African-American female, the only mentor I should have is an African-American female. I would say quite the opposite. My mentor should be an older white man. So, because when you heard Dr. Goldman say his mentor had some beliefs and some things that were different, but when they got in that classroom and his professor saw some talent in him that he himself couldn't even see, now you got action. Because you have someone who started with an assumption, some beliefs, and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now I have a candidate who's really showing me something. So I think that we have got to push on things that we've kind of always assumed were good and really look and see what is beneath the surface in that. And then I think that there are some things that just have to be table stakes at this point. Employee resource groups or business resource groups, whatever title you want to give to those, because so much of what is challenging is the feeling of isolation. There's not one other person on this farm who looks like me. There's not one other person on this farm who, when we go outside to walk horses and it's pouring down rain and we have to do it because the animals need care, and then we're going to turn around and do something, there's not one person that can help me get it together because this hair doesn't pull up, it doesn't tie up, it's just going to do what it wants to do, right? And so we also have to get better about saying, I can handle that, right? Because it's been me in this body for a long time, but who can I talk to in the company? If that person is not here, who can I reach out to and say, I am having one of those days? and that person can put me in a space where it is safe. There is no risk to my career. I'm not going to be judged and say, what do you need to say to me? That person doesn't have to look like me, but we need to also do better about creating safe spaces. And then for me, I would say, and this is what I say to my current, organization, anything that we're doing for corporate employees, especially pre-COVID, we have to find a way for remote facility employees to take part. If the website's down, if the audio's bad, that exposure and that interaction has to be same for same when we think about headquartered versus remote facility associates.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Why don't we close out to that same theme, because you certainly pushed us to some actions that we can do. Look at our people practices from an equitable view. Make those performance management systems and people review discussions actionable. Make sure more than just one manager or senior leader knows and can affirm and talk about you. More than one person who is in that room that we're not in should be able to give voice to your talents. So why don't we hear Dr. Farrell, Osa Deba, and Dr. Goldman also keep up that theme in our last minutes quickly of what can we do?
So I would say we have to challenge the status quo. And one of the things that I tell folks is that we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable having these conversations, because if we're comfortable, we're going to be complacent, but when we're uncomfortable, we're going to grow. And so we have to have these conversations. And then lastly, I would say, I know that we are creating many diversity, equity, and inclusion roles within our organization, but we have to be mindful that it's not just the person's role in that position, but it's everyone's role to uphold the diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization. And so we have to keep that at the forefront as we do this work.
Absolutely. It's not just one person or one department. Osadeba, your thoughts. What can we do?
I believe one thing that Together We Grow can do, and all the partners with them, is to help highlight how fun agriculture is with the youth that are to come in places where they are. Right now, I know I had a interesting conversation with Kristen when I had our brief discussion before this panel. And honestly, when I went out to work in the field, sorry about the sounds, but when I went out to work in the field, the youngest person that was one of my clients was 55. And working with him, who had to report to his father of 70, I'm not having conversations with his 7-year-old grandson. I'm not having conversations with his 15-year-old son, who will then later on inherit the farm. But if we play that in my background from where I'm from, we're not even having those conversations. We should meet them on Instagram. We should meet them on Facebook. We should meet them utilizing youth and younger people who actually know what might be interesting to them in agriculture. Agriculture is fun. If we meet them and help them highlight the fun parts, they'll be interested enough to get on board.
Great. Thank you, Deba, for that. So expanding our ways that we brand and tell the story in social circles, meet people where they are, start younger for sure. And tell about the great, exciting careers that exist. Thank you for that, Osadeba. Dr. Goldman.
Yes, couple things. I want to go back to someone mentioned earlier about success with entry-level positions versus not having people at the top. And I would want to reemphasize that and just point out that diversity should be equitable throughout all phases of an organization. So if your executive team is lily white and you're trying to bring in Black folk at the bottom and there's no one for them to look up to, it's probably not going to be met with overwhelming results. The other watch out there, though, is that if the executive team is as diverse as you want it to be and you don't have the appropriate checks and balances as you go from the CEO down to the entry-level position, there's a lot of room for disconnect, where personal biases come in and things don't happen. So you have a corporate direction, corporate focus that's not being implemented at the ground level when the hiring decisions are being made. So what I say is put your money where your mouth is. I mean, if you value diversity, go to places where diversity is practiced at the universities or other companies or whatever, but go to places where there are diverse candidates and let folks rewards. Dr. Marshall mentioned the annual evaluations. If diversity is a thing, let that show up in the annual evaluation to where you get appointed to for reaching outside the box and getting some diverse candidates. So those two things I would say, but there's one thing I have to say, and at the council we have what we call this ag apprenticeship program. It's meant to give students from 1890 schools relevant on-farm experience with some of our growers. I haven't heard a lot of people talk a lot about this is agriculture, and farmers now are more diverse and more sophisticated than probably at any time in history. But fundamentally, farmers have to plant a seed, raise an animal, get it to market, and sell it. I know there are options right now, but the majority of that happens outside in the heat, in the cold, in the wet, in the rain. I mean, if you have an expectation that you're going to have a successful career in agriculture, I mean, Miss Harper is always dressed to the nines. But I saw her here at our field day, and her do had done a little flop, and we had stopped perspiring. We were all sweating at about 11 o'clock when it got hot. But that's agriculture. It doesn't have to. You don't have to do that. But you need to understand what goes on out there. So if you're serious about pursuing a career in agriculture, I heard you, Mia, talking about being out in the field, in the 4-H offices or whatever. You need to invest some time in yourself to where even if you have a corporate job where you can look as sharp as Melissa every day and never bake or sweat, you need to know what goes on out in the farm, because I can guarantee you that that investment that you have in yourself will help propel you at all stages of your career. And I'm speaking from experience on that one.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. That's a great closing point. You know, the best lessons that we've learned to pivot some of our corporate practices came from spending time out in the field, whether it was we need to train women in sales differently, because when they call on the farm gate, they get a different reaction. So each of you, thank you so much, Dr. Farrell, Osadeba, I call you Deba, Dr. Goldman, Dr. Marshall. I mean, we will continue to tap into you as we pass these learnings along to bring others into what we can learn from your personal stories. A great day one, Together We Grow, for our annual meeting. Thank you, Kristen, Deborah, and Michael, everyone that's been here, and we will convene tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.